My son-in-law called the police to kick me out of my caravan and sold it without my permission, but when they arrived, I was sipping lukewarm tea when I heard the knock. Not the kind you hear from family or neighbors, soft, rhythmic. No, this one was firm, official, intentional. I did not even have to turn my head to know who had called them. My bones felt it before my ears caught the command. "Ma'am." The voice was male, clipped, polite in a way that always precedes cruelty. "We need to ask you to step out of the vehicle." Vehicle? They never called it what it was. Not a home, just a piece of metal parked on their land, just a vehicle. I opened the door of the caravan slowly, letting the late autumn air touch the back of my neck. My knees protested as I stepped down, but I smiled gently at the officer. Two of them were standing in the driveway, hands on their hips. Behind them, Steve was already talking. "She cannot see well," he said, arms crossed. "She ran over the sprinkler last week, parked halfway onto the neighbor's lawn. I am worried about her. We are just trying to keep her safe." Steve had a voice like gravel, soaked in bleach, scratched, harsh, and never natural. He used words like "we," as if Marlene had any say in what he decided. My daughter stood beside him, quiet, eyes down. I saw the folded arms, the forced frown, the little shake of the head that always followed whenever she tried to pretend she was not part of something. "I understand, sir," the officer nodded. "Ma'am, we have received a safety report. We are required to ask you to step out of the RV for inspection. You will not be removed, just a temporary check to ensure everything is in order." That is when Steve took a step forward, not toward the police, but toward me. "It has already been sold anyway," he announced, like it was a blessing. "The buyer is on the way. We found a good place for you, Mom. A senior living community with meals and nurses and exercise classes. No more struggling with the toilet or trying to fix the heater when it cuts out. It is what you need." The way he said, "what you need," made me feel like a cracked teacup someone was pretending to save before tossing it into the trash. I did not speak. What was there to say? I looked at the officers, nodded once, then stepped back into my home, my caravan, my Clement's last gift to me. I reached for the wooden box that always sat beneath the window seat, untouched unless I needed comfort. My fingers brushed over the lid, and I picked it up, light as ever, though heavy with memory. Inside it was the cloth-wrapped canvas, his last sketch. He had not even signed it, but I knew it was him. I knew because I had watched him draw the outline with shaking hands days before he collapsed in the garden. I stepped outside and stood quietly by the porch stairs of the main house, the box hugged tight against my chest. The officers began inspecting the caravan, while Steve stood tall, hands on hips, like he had conquered something. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. One officer leaned in through the caravan window. "No sign of fire hazards? Everything's functional. Pretty tidy, actually." "Did you check the brakes?" Steve asked. "And the power system? Last time it blew the fuse in our house. I do not think she even understands the danger she is in." I turned to Marlene. My voice was low, gentle, the way I used to speak to her when she cried as a child after nightmares. "Why now?" Her mouth quivered. "It is for your own good, Mom. You need help. You do not even drive anymore. The insurance is too much, and you do not really live in it. And..." I looked down at the canvas box, at the dirt stains on my shoes, at the way her wedding ring sparkled under the porch light, while mine had been tucked away since the funeral. "You don't know where I live or what this place means," I said finally. Steve let out a sigh. "We are not doing this out of spite. We are thinking long term. You always say you do not want to be a burden, right? So let us take care of things now before it gets worse." That was Steve, always a favor disguised as a knife. The other officer stepped down from the caravan, holding a clipboard. "Ma'am, can you provide ownership documents? Title of registration?" I nodded slowly. "It is in the house, in the old safe behind the pantry. I will get it." Steve's face twitched. Just a flicker. He had not expected me to know where the title was. He followed me in, uninvited, as I opened the creaky cabinet door. The safe was rusted but intact. I turned the combination slowly, same one Clement had set, his military ID number. Inside was the envelope, neatly labeled. I handed it to the officer without looking at Steve. Registered owner, Geneva May Belmont, the officer read aloud. No co-owners, no power of attorney transfers on file. And, he flipped the page. No recent sales reported. Steve coughed. She's probably mistaken. We signed the sale last week, right, Geneva? I met his eyes. You forged my name. The silence that followed was thick enough to hear the wind shift. The officers looked at each other. We will need to report this. Until this is resolved, the vehicle cannot be sold, removed, or occupied by anyone other than the registered owner. Steve's voice jumped an octave. You have no idea what she's like. She talks to herself. She burns food. She could die in that thing and no one would know. I stood quietly. You already made up your mind, I said. Long before this morning, you just needed a reason. He scoffed. You really think clinging to a rust bucket and a dead man's sketch makes you noble? No, I said. It reminds me what love was before it got buried under signatures and shame. I turned my back to them and walked back to the caravan. The officer held the door for me. Inside, I placed the box gently back in its place. The seat creaked under me as I sat. Steve stood outside, still pacing, still barking at his wife, at the officer, at the world. But inside, it was quiet again, just like it used to be. I remember the day we bought it, Clement and I, a gray afternoon in late March, the kind of afternoon that leaves the air heavy with old rain and second thoughts. But we had no second thoughts. We walked across the gravel lot, like children choosing a puppy. He stopped in front of it, a weathered, soft blue Airstream, the kind that looked like it belonged more to a love letter than a parking space. This is the one, he whispered. We will take our last ride in this, Geneva. Just you and me. We will not belong to a place anymore. We will belong to each other. 20 years of saving. That is how long it took. 1 week after our mortgage was paid off, I had worked nights at the county clinic. He had sold war illustrations and painted barns on commission. We never vacationed, never bought new clothes, but we had that dream, a dream in aluminum and steel and freedom. Clement was never loud. He never raised his voice. But when he talked about the road, his voice thickened with something hope, maybe, or the memory of when life felt young enough to still surprise you. He said the road was the only place where his lungs ever felt full. We drove it first to the Blue Ridge, just for a weekend. We parked by a trailhead and spent 2 days drinking instant coffee and reading in silence. The only sound was the soft scratching of his pencil on sketch pad. He always drew when he was calm. He drew me a lot. Sometimes, I wondered if he was trying to memorize me before life erased my edges. Years passed, and we took it everywhere, little places mostly. Farmers markets, state parks, small towns with no hotels but hearts big enough to welcome strangers. He never needed much. Just his sketchbook, good coffee, and my hand nearby. He started coughing more around his 68th birthday. The doctor said it was just age, maybe dust. But one morning, as he crouched near the small table in the caravan, drawing the silhouette of a pine tree through the window, he fell forward, pencil still in his grip. I held him as he struggled to breathe, his eyes wide with something more than fear. He passed before the ambulance arrived. I did not cry that night. I just sat on the steps of the caravan, the door open behind me, waiting for the sky to say something. It never did, but the stars showed up anyway. After that, they told me to sell the vehicle. Too many memories, the grief counselor said. You should start fresh. But how do you start fresh when the only fresh thing in your life had been a man who could sketch your soul in silence? I kept it. I parked it behind Marlene's house when I moved in. I made sure the tires stayed inflated, the oil was checked, the windows sealed. I vacuumed it once a week, dusted the windowsills. I even replaced the tiny curtains he had sewn by hand when the old ones began to fade. They said I was clinging. Maybe I was. But it was not just nostalgia. That caravan was my temple, my proof that love existed in quiet places. Every morning, I made tea and sat in the passenger seat, facing east. Clement always believed the sun rose for those who looked for it. Under the seat cushion, in a hidden panel, Clement had once playfully called the treasure drawer, was a rolled canvas wrapped in cloth. I had not unwrapped it in years, but I knew what it held. He started it the week before he died. I remember his words exactly. He had looked at me and said, "I want to draw you one more time, not how you look, how you feel to me." I watched him sketch for hours, the tremble in his fingers refusing to obey, but his eyes were so full of stillness. He called it the silent wife. I saw the words penciled in faintly at the top of the page. He never finished it, not completely. The outline was there. The shadowing was gentle, unfinished. But it was me. Not how I looked in the mirror, but how I existed in his heart. I never showed it to anyone. I did not need to. It was never meant for the world. It was meant for memory. Sometimes Josh would sneak into the caravan when he was younger. He would sit beside me and ask, "Grandpa really drew all these?" pointing at the sketches we had pinned up around the walls. I would nod, and he would smile. "He must have loved you a lot." Yes, he did. Love is not in the noise. It is not in the grand gestures, or the big houses, or the sparkling rings. It is in the way someone sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to keep looking. That caravan saw more of me than any house ever did. It saw me laugh at Clement's terrible chili. It saw me cry into his flannel shirt after the diagnosis. It saw us sleep back to back on a mattress barely wide enough for one. It saw our last meal, our last song, our last breath together. When Steve called it junk, I did not respond. When Marlene said I should let go of the past, I nodded. Because some things do not need defending. The caravan was not just a shell on wheels. It was our last conversation, the one that never needed to be spoken, the one I still hear every morning when the light hits the seat just right. I stayed silent all those years, not because I had nothing to say, but because what we had did not need to be explained. It was ours. And I would not let anyone take that away. Not Steve, not even my daughter. There was a time I wore white every day, not for fashion, for service, for bandages and burns, for bleeding boys who clutched rosaries and letters from their mothers. I was 23 when I became an army nurse, 24 when I gave birth to Marlene, 25 when Clement was deployed to a base so far off, mail from him came less often than rain in July. I raised our daughter alone for a full decade. No birthday cakes made by a father's hands, no bedtime stories with a different voice. Just me. A woman with calloused feet, quick hands, and a quiet voice that always said, "It's okay, Mama's here." We lived simply, a rented duplex, a garden in the back that gave us tomatoes in summer and nothing in winter. I would walk to work in my nurse's uniform and come home to wash dishes in cold water because the heater was always one gust away from quitting. But Marlene, oh, she was sunshine in a glass bottle, bright, beautiful, sharp as a pin. Even as a child, she had the poise of someone born to be admired. Her teachers praised her. Neighbors called her a real standout. I thought that meant I had done something right. Until one day, I realized I had become the wrong side of her story. It started small, suggestions at first. "Maybe don't wear your hair like that, Mom. It makes you look tired." Then, "Could you not wear those shoes to the parent-teacher night?" And finally, "Please do not come inside the photo shoot. Just drop me off." I didn't fight it. I told myself she was nervous, image-conscious. But it was Clement who saw it clearly when he came back. "She treats you like an obligation," he said once, folding his coat after a school recital. "Like you're the stain on the hem she cannot cut out." I smiled then, told him not to be dramatic. "She's just young, she'll grow out of it." But she didn't. She grew deeper into it. By the time she was 17, Marlene was the face of a local campaign for a fashion boutique in town. Her picture was on buses. People whispered her name like it came with royalty. And me? I was the woman told to wait outside the press event. When she won a scholarship to a prestigious university, I sewed her a new dress, saved from my shifts. She never wore it. "It looks handmade," she said. People will notice. She didn't ask me to come to her graduation. I remember the envelope, thick, embossed, with her name in gold. I waited for a second one, for mine, but it never came. When I asked her why, she said, I don't want people to assume I came from poverty. I need them to see me as more. And I was less. I stayed silent. I hugged her when she left for college. I mailed her birthday cards. I even sent her photos of the garden in bloom. She never responded to any of them. When she married Steve, I wore a borrowed dress and pinned my hair back the way she liked. The day before the wedding, she told me, please don't speak unless someone speaks to you first. And maybe, just stay in the back during photos. Steve's family is very particular. So I stayed behind the camera. I never held her hand in any photo, never kissed her cheek. When people asked who I was, I said, I'm her mother, and they looked at me like I had said something unbelievable. I had hoped Josh would change things. When he was born, she let me help. For the first time in years, she needed me. I moved into their home for a while, stayed in the guest room, took midnight feedings so she could sleep. When Steve lost a major real estate deal and their finances crumbled, I covered their grocery bills for 3 months. I paid for Josh's vaccinations, bought him winter clothes, even gave Marlene gas money so she wouldn't miss work. They never thanked me, but I did not ask. Then, when Steve approached me and said he needed to invest in an opportunity, I believed him. He asked for $12,000, said it was short-term, just a bridge until the deal closed. I withdrew it from Clement's pension, money I had put aside for emergencies. Steve never paid it back. When I asked months later, he laughed. You gave it willingly. That's not a loan, that's just poor decision-making. I didn't bring it up again. The final fracture came on a day meant to be simple. Josh had a school play. I walked him to class every Thursday, as I always did. But that day, Steve saw me walking toward the school gates and stopped me cold. You shouldn't walk him in anymore, he said. Some of the other parents asked about you. The way you dress, you make him look out of place. I only wear what I can afford, I said. He shrugged. Maybe that's the problem. I nodded and turned around. That night, Josh snuck into the Caravan. He climbed into my lap like he was 5 again and whispered, I don't care what they think. I love you. I held him for a long time, long enough to forget, briefly, how sharp silence can cut. People say it's the big betrayals that hurt. But no, it's the tiny dismissals, the unspoken shame, the way a child learns to erase your name from their mouth because they fear how others might react. I wasn't angry. I was erased. But even a pencil mark, rubbed raw, leaves a shadow on the page, and I was still here. They called it concern. That was the word Steve used over and over. Concerned. He said it with the kind of authority men like him wear like a badge. Not earned. Assumed. I first heard about it from Mrs. Lacey next door. She came by with a Tupperware of peach cobbler and a careful tone. Steve said you're not seeing well these days, she murmured as she handed me the dish. That maybe you're not safe alone out here. I told him you seemed fine, but he looked real worried. Worried. That was rich, coming from a man who once left his toddler unattended on a porch swing while he took a conference call. It wasn't long before the whispers spread. She nearly backed into the hydrant last week. I saw her fumbling with her keys in the dark. She left her lights on for hours, must have forgotten. All true, in fragments. But none of it meant what they thought it did. Yes, I had cataracts. Yes, my depth perception was poor at night. But I wasn't driving across state lines. I wasn't running stop signs or getting lost in traffic. I moved the Caravan from one side of the driveway to the other every couple of months, just to keep the battery alive and the tires from settling. That was enough for Steve to build a case. He began recording me. At first, just casually. I'd see his phone pointed out the kitchen window while I cleaned the exterior. Then it was more deliberate. He once asked me to turn on the generator while he tested the voltage. I did. He filmed me struggling with the pull start 3 times before it caught. That clip ended up in his montage. Yes, a montage. Because on the morning of my removal, he went live. Facebook, Instagram, even some neighborhood app I'd never heard of. I found out later he captioned the stream, "I don't want her to die in a tin box. Sometimes love means making the hard choices." He stood in the driveway like some tragic hero, hands folded, voice quivering for the camera. Behind him, I was in the doorway of the Caravan, holding a grocery bag and wondering why the police were back. People commented in real time, "This is so heartbreaking. You're doing the right thing, Steve. She's lucky to have a son-in-law who cares. Praying for your family." No one asked me if I was okay. The officers were the same two from before. One was quieter this time, the other had a clipboard. "We received a wellness check request," he said. "Multiple reports suggest you may be at risk living in the vehicle alone. It's not about removing you, ma'am. It's about safety protocol." I nodded. Because if I spoke, I might shake, and I never gave them the satisfaction of seeing me shake. Steve stepped forward and did his bit. "She's been having episodes," he said, "forgetting things, leaving water running. The other night she left the stovetop on. It was just luck that I checked." Lies. I hadn't cooked in the Caravan in weeks. I ate dinner in my lap most nights after microwaving a bowl of oatmeal inside the main house. But who would they believe? A son-in-law in pressed khakis, pleading for safety, or a silent old woman in a worn shawl with bad eyes? The answer was, in the clipboard, in the notes, in the way one of the officers nodded while Steve spoke. Then Marlene stepped out. She wore a cashmere cardigan and a look I had not seen since she was 13, and begging me not to walk her into school. "She doesn't understand," Marlene said to the officers. "She holds on to everything. Old sweaters, broken radios. Her world ended when my father died, and she's never moved forward. It's not her fault, but we can't just let her rot in there." Rot. That word hit harder than I expected, because that was what they saw decay. Not a woman maintaining her independence, not a mother honoring the memory of her husband, just decay. Steve raised his phone again. He filmed me standing there, still and silent, my hand clutching the hem of my sleeve. I wondered how many likes his video would get, how many strangers would write comments about how stubborn old folks just don't know when to quit. I wondered if any of them had watched their spouse die inches from a sketchpad, if they'd ever opened a drawer and found a half-finished portrait of their own aging face beautiful in the way only someone who truly saw them could make it. They didn't know. They didn't ask. Instead, they offered brochures, a facility in Peoria, one in Bloomington, places with activities and shared dining and supervised care. As if what I needed was more bingo and less autonomy. One of the officers said, "We're not forcing anything today, just recommending a transition. Maybe talk it over with your family." My family. Standing in front of me, arms folded, already picturing where they'd park once the Caravan was gone. The neighbors watched from their porches. Some waved awkwardly, others turned away. Mrs. Lacey didn't come out. And I? I went back inside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I sat in the same seat Clement used to sit in while he sketched the horizon. I let the silence settle around me like an old coat. Out there, Steve was still talking. In here, I was remembering. Because you cannot perform compassion. You can only live it. And someday, when the camera stops rolling and the applause fades, Steve would find that out the hard way. People forget that when the lights go out, the truth still knows where you sleep. I did not sleep the night after they came with their clipboard and cameras. I sat in the Caravan, listening to the wind through the window screen, the groan of old metal, the creak of memory. By sunrise, I had made my decision. Some things require more than silence. Some things require a name. So I reached for an address I had not used in 20 years, a number I had dialed only once when his mother died. Back then, he had been just a boy with a shaved head, cheeks sunken from chemo, eyes too old for 10. I still remembered the way his hand had clutched mine through 3 rounds of morphine. He used to call me Miss Genny and said I smelled like warm sugar. His name was Thomas Reinhold. Now, he was an attorney with a practice in Springfield. When I called, the receptionist asked, "Do you have an appointment?" No, I said. But tell him Geneva Belmont is calling. Tell him I remember the night he got his last clear scan. She put me on hold for all of 20 seconds. Then came his voice, deeper now, tired but kind. Miss Jenny? Hello, Thomas. He drove down the very next day. He brought coffee and an old photo one I did not know he had kept. It was me, holding his hand in a hospital bed, back when he still wore Spider-Man socks and thought candy could fix anything. I owe you a lot more than legal counsel, he said, after I explained everything. I handed him the paperwork. The title of ownership to the Caravan, dated and signed 22 years ago, my name and mine alone. And then I gave him the cassette tape. Clement had recorded it the winter before he died. A simple cassette player. He never liked writing much. Said his hands were built to draw, not hold a pen. Thomas played the tape in his car. I stood outside the driver's window, wind wrapping around my shawl. Clement's voice crackled through the static. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone, he said, quiet but clear. And if they're questioning who owns the Caravan, tell them it belongs to Geneva. Not just legally, but rightfully. Everything inside it, her hands touched it first. Her love kept it warm. Let them know I meant for her to have it. Let them know this isn't just a vehicle, it's our whole damn life. Thomas blinked once, then nodded. He didn't ask more questions. By that evening, he had filed an emergency injunction with the local civil court, requesting a halt on all transfer, sale, or occupation of the Caravan by any party other than the registered owner. It would take 3 days for a hearing. But in that time, something unexpected happened. The video Steve had posted, his live stream, the one meant to paint himself as the caring son-in-law, started making rounds. Not because of his words, but because of my silence. Someone clipped the footage, just the part where I stood, holding a grocery bag, eyes down, lips tight. Marlene's voice in the background saying, "She holds on to everything, even things as outdated as she is." They put music under it, a slow, melancholy piano piece. They titled it, "When Family Stops Seeing You." It went viral in less than 2 days. Over 700,000 views by the weekend. Comments poured in. I don't even know this woman, but I see my grandmother in her. She's not outdated. She's the foundation they're walking on. I hope she gets her home back. Someone from a local news station reached out, then a national podcast, then a journalist who specialized in elder rights. Steve tried to pull the video down, but it was too late. People had saved it, shared it, turned it into something larger than all of us. Marlene's co-workers began asking questions. A few of her brand deals quietly vanished. And suddenly, Steve was not giving interviews. He was hiding behind blinds. Meanwhile, Thomas prepared the case. He brought me folders and explanations, but I did not need the legal terms. I just wanted one sentence spoken aloud, in court. This belongs to her. That was all. Josh came by late one evening, slipped into the Caravan while the house slept. He sat on the floor, his back against the closet door. "They're freaking out," he whispered. "Dad said you're ruining everything." I smiled. "Have I ever told you what your grandfather used to say about ruins?" Josh shook his head. He said, "Sometimes a ruin is just a home waiting to be respected again." Josh grinned. "That sounds like him." Then he pulled something from his pocket, a photo. It was me, standing in front of the Caravan, 20 years ago, holding a picnic basket and laughing. Clement must have taken it. "I found it in Mom's old albums," he said. "She tried to throw it away." I reached for the photo. My hands trembled slightly as I held it. There I was, hair longer, eyes brighter, a version of myself I almost forgot. "She doesn't see you," Josh said quietly. "But I do." I kissed his forehead. And that was enough to carry me through the next day. Because love does not always come in armies. Sometimes it comes in one boy who still remembers who taught him how to tie his shoes. 3 days later, the court date arrived. Steve tried to delay it. His lawyer cited emotional distress and misunderstood intentions. But the judge had seen the footage. He had also read the deed. He had listened to the tape. And he ruled. The Caravan was mine. Entirely. Irrevocably. Unequivocally. When the gavel struck, I exhaled a breath I did not know I had been holding since Clement's last sketch. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt heard. I waited until the court documents were signed, sealed, and filed before I opened the panel beneath the bench seat. The metal latch creaked when I lifted it. The scent of aged paper and linseed oil drifted out like an old friend exhaling. I had not touched that hidden compartment in over a decade. Not since Clement died, but I always knew it was there waiting, like everything he ever gave me. Inside, wrapped in a cotton cloth once used for dusting, was the last piece of him. He had called it The Silent Wife, though he never wrote the title down. He had whispered it to me once, a week before the stroke, while sipping black coffee with two shaky hands. "I want to draw you like I remember you," he had said. "Not how you look, but how you hold the world together without anyone ever noticing." I had sat in the passenger seat, reading a worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea, and he sketched me just as I was. Legs crossed, head tilted, lips parted mid-sentence. A moment so ordinary, it could have belonged to anyone, but it was ours. I unrolled the canvas gently on the table in the Caravan. Even unfinished, it took my breath. Charcoal lines, soft as breath, shadows that seemed to pulse. The book in my hands, the slant of light from the window. The barely there smile at the edge of my mouth, like he had seen it from behind his eyes and poured it onto paper. That night, I sent a photo of the piece to Thomas. He called back within an hour. "I need to show this to someone," he said. 2 days later, we met a man named Harold Liam, a curator and private collector who had handled several of Clement's early war pieces. He wore linen shirts, always 2 sizes too large, and spoke like each word cost $1. When he stepped into the Caravan and saw the sketch laid across the table, he stopped breathing. "Good Lord," he muttered, crouching to examine the lines. "This is his. This is unmistakably his, and it's better than anything I've seen from him before." He took off his glasses and stood silently for several moments, fingers trembling. "Did you know," he asked, "that Clement Belmont's field sketches are part of the Smithsonian's Vietnam archive?" I nodded. He hated that they were locked behind glass. "This one," Harold said, pointing to the piece, "belongs out in the world." He arranged for it to be reviewed, authenticated, and appraised. The valuation came back at $190,000. I laughed when I heard it, not because of the number, but because Clement would have rolled his eyes. "He'd rather we use it to fix the water heater," I told Thomas. But I knew what I wanted to do. I called Harold the next day. "You can exhibit it," I said, "but only if you include a message, a sentence." He hesitated. "What would you like it to say?" I closed my eyes and remembered the feel of Clement's hand in mine the last night before he left the world. "Final work of Clement Belmont," I said, "dedicated to Geneva, his wife, his witness, his wordless companion, a woman who did not need to speak to be loved." There was silence on the other end. Then Harold said, "We'll print it large." The exhibition launched 6 weeks later at the Chicago Museum of Modern Memory. It was part of a national program honoring under-recognized war artists. They titled the show The Forgotten Hands. But Clement's piece, Ours, was the centerpiece. They mounted it with soft lighting between 2 glass panels. Visitors stood in front of it and cried. Some took pictures, others just stood there, silent. One woman left a note in the guest book. "I saw my mother in this." Another wrote, "This feels like a prayer for the women we forget." The press picked it up. NPR did a feature on Clement's lost legacy. The Washington Post published a Sunday spread about the war artist who drew love in the quiet. And my name was in the byline, not as a footnote, not as wife of, but as subject, as soul. Steve called once after that. I let it ring. Marlene sent an email. It said, "I didn't know." 3 words, no greeting, no apology. I didn't respond. What would I say? That I had always known? That I had never needed a headline to remind me of my worth? One morning, Josh came with his art teacher. They asked if they could see the sketch in person. The museum had offered to send it on a national tour, but for one weekend they returned it to the Caravan just for me. We unrolled it together on the same table where Clement once set his pencils. Josh stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, "He really saw you, didn't he?" "Yes," I said. His teacher said nothing. She just wiped her eyes. Because that was the thing about love when it was real. It didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be witnessed. And now, finally, it was. I never wanted blood. That's not my way. When a woman has survived war, childbirth, grief, and a world that forgets her name, she learns that vengeance doesn't always require a sword. Sometimes, it just requires patience. It started with the court ruling. Once the ownership of the Caravan was restored to me, Thomas quietly passed along the relevant documentation to the county office that handled real estate licensing. Steve's forged signature wasn't just a family betrayal, it was a legal offense. The brokerage board began their investigation within days. They found not only the forged transfer forms, but also discrepancies in several of Steve's past filings. He had a pattern pressuring elderly clients into expedited sales, then flipping their properties at a profit before paperwork caught up. The thing about pretending to care for old people? You should probably not leave a digital trail behind when you exploit them. The state board revoked his license in under a month. He appealed, of course, cried in public interviews, blamed stress, blamed confusion, said I was mentally unstable and that I misunderstood his intentions. But the recordings, the ones he had proudly posted, became evidence against him. His own voice, his own smirking face, his own callous words about letting her rot in that thing. The irony? His downfall began with the video he uploaded to make himself look righteous. They fined him $50,000 for fraudulent misrepresentation. It might have been more if Thomas had pushed for additional damages. But I told him not to. "This isn't about making him poor," I said. "It's about making him honest." Marlene's turn came soon after. Her employer, a wellness and beauty brand, had quietly tolerated the rumors until the footage surfaced of her speaking before the police, the words about me being as outdated as the things she clings to. They tried to manage the PR storm, but the damage was done. Commenters flooded the company's social media. "This is who you let represent your brand?" She abandoned the woman who raised her. "Is this the image you're proud of?" Within a week, they announced her contract had been mutually concluded. She lost her job. Then came the bank letters. Turns out, when Steve lost his license, they also lost their primary income. The mortgage, already behind from years of over-leveraged refinancing, came due. Payments missed. Grace periods expired. The foreclosure sign went up less than 3 months after the court hearing. Josh moved in with his uncle for a while. I offered, quietly, but he said it'd be easier if he stayed elsewhere during the transition. I understood. I knew he was still trying to love his parents. Let him. That's the hardest job of all. I never filed criminal charges. I had every right to. Thomas was ready. The DA had called. There was a case to be made. Elder fraud, coercion, false documentation. But I said no. Instead, I wrote a letter. On thick paper, with the pen Clement once used to sketch blueprints when he tried designing us a folding picnic table. The ink bled a little from my hand pressure. The words were steady. "I will not press charges. I do not want to see anyone jailed. But I do want you to live not behind bars, but inside the echo of the name you built for yourselves. Every introduction, every awkward glance. Every employer that Googles you, every neighbor who remembers. Let that be your sentence. Just honesty. I think that's fair." I signed it with just one name. Geneva. Marlene never responded. Steve sent back a typed reply through his lawyer that was half denial, half veiled threat. I tore it up without reading the rest. Sometimes, dignity means not finishing a sentence. One afternoon, I was sweeping out the Caravan when a woman from the neighborhood came by. "I'm sorry," she said, twisting the strap of her purse. "I believed them. I thought you were confused." "I was," I said. I confused silence for peace. She asked if she could see the painting. I let her, she cried. Word traveled. A few more neighbors came. One brought cookies, one brought a thermos of coffee. They called it visiting the exhibit, like it was some museum tucked into a driveway. It made me laugh, but it also made me proud. Not of the painting, of the stillness that had survived. People think justice is a hammer. Sometimes it's a mirror. I didn't ruin Steve. He filmed himself doing that. I didn't destroy Marlene. She threw away the hand that fed, raised, and forgave her. All I did was wait. And when the time came, I let the world see. That was enough. I named her the Silent Bell. It felt right. After everything, after the court, the gallery, the letters, the silence turned sharp, then soft again. I looked at that old Caravan, sanded her corners, repainted her trim, and gave her a name that felt like memory and mercy in one breath. Belle, because Clement used to call me that when no one else did. Silent, because that was how I survived. Together, they sounded like freedom. I replaced the curtains with soft yellow ones. The kind Clement always said made the morning light look like honey. I fixed the dent near the door, where Josh once scraped it with his tricycle. I stitched new cushions, wiped the walls clean, and tucked the framed court ruling under the mattress, not for bitterness, but as a reminder. The photo of Clement, just his soft smile, no uniform, sat by the window now. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I simply packed a week's worth of dry food, a coffee tin, and my softest sweater. I filled the tank, warmed up the engine, and rolled down the window to let in the scent of early spring. I was halfway down the drive when I heard it. "Grandma!" "Josh!" He came running, socks on the gravel, waving something in his hand. I stopped the engine and opened the door. He climbed in without asking, same as he used to when he was 5. "I found this," he said, a little out of breath, cheeks flushed. "I was cleaning out Dad's old office. It was stuffed behind a filing cabinet." He handed it to me. A drawing. Charcoal on construction paper, yellowed with time. It was me, holding Josh when he was a baby. Clement had captured the way my arms cradled him, the tilt of my head, the wide-eyed look Josh always gave the sky. On the back, Clement had scrawled, "For the 2 quietest hearts I know." I held it for a long moment. Josh cleared his throat. "I know you're going, and I get it. But don't forget me, okay?" My chest tightened. I brushed his hair back and kissed his temple. "I never did. I never will." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Someday," he said, stepping back, "I want to ride with you. I want to see what Grandpa saw." "You will," I whispered, "when you're ready." He stood on the gravel as I restarted the engine. I waved once in the mirror, and he waved back, small and still and strong. I turned onto Route 16, heading west. The road curved like a ribbon unwinding, taking me past old fields, broken barns, signs faded by time. I turned on the old cassette player Clement had installed long ago. A song crackled through his favorite. A blues track, slow and smoky, that we used to dance to on quiet nights when the power flickered and the world felt far away. I whispered, "This time, I'm driving. You get to rest." The photo of him by the window smiled back. "I'll take us to the mountains you never reached, the coastlines we planned for but never made. I'll find every quiet place, every sunrise, every diner with bad coffee and good pie." The miles fell away like old fears. I imagined him beside me, sketchpad in hand, one foot on the dashboard like he used to do when he was thinking. "However many sunsets are left," I said out loud, "let's count them together, you and me." Because the road was ours now. And finally, it was open. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone you've loved, someone you've lost, or someone the world tried to forget, then maybe it wasn't just a story. Maybe it was a mirror. Thank you for walking this road with Geneva. For more stories like hers, quiet, defiant, and unforgettable, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because sometimes, the ones with the softest voices carry the most powerful truths.